Good morning and welcome to our Connect session, the October edition. My name is Walter Mbambo. I am from Petro Connect. I am the Labor Relations Advisor. And as I'm sure you may be aware that today we are strictly talking about MIBCO Compliance. And with this particular topic, I know it's one that has been troubling dealers quite a lot. And so we were quite fortunate to be joined by our panel from MIBCO. So they will be also assisting us with decoding some of the questions and some of the concerns that may be coming through from dealers. The intention of this session is just to assist everyone with compliance, because we know that if sites are not compliant, a lot of things can go wrong. So ours is to inform, ours is to share knowledge, and just to make sure that everyone has a clear view and a clear picture of how everything should run. And so before we begin, I'd like to also just mention that we will be running questions and we'll be accepting questions through our live chat box. And so if you have any questions, send them through there and we will be able to speak to them and to answer them as well as we move along. But before we begin, I'd like to just introduce my panel, but I'd like for them probably to introduce themselves. I think maybe that's better. And then maybe let's start with Mr. Erasmus from my right.
Good morning. My name is Erasmus. I'm the team leader of the agents in KZN region for MIBCO.
Thank you, Ross. I'm Spelele Nyuswa. I'm the regional secretary for MIBCO KZN. Thank you.
Good morning, all. My name is Nevan Subramani. I'm the chief agent for the inspected department at MIBCO KZN. Thank you.
All right. No, thank you. Thank you very much. Before we begin, I'd like to give Mr. Nyuswa an opportunity to give us opening remarks, and then we will be able to begin with the session.
Thank you, Walter. Greetings, everyone. If you would please just allow me just a few minutes just to introduce who MIBCO is, especially for the benefit of the new dealers, guys who are newly joining MIBCO, or those who have just registered or who are thinking to register or purchase dealerships within the motor industry. Basically, MIBCO stands for the Motor Industry Bargaining Council, and we are a national organization. We're a bargaining council whose head office is in Randburg in Gauteng. MIBCO was established according to to Section 27 of the LRA, and its powers basically and functions are to maintain industrial peace, underline industrial peace and stability within the workplace. That is our mandate. Like any bargaining council, MIBCO is made out of parties. Without parties, we cease to exist. Parties at MIBCO, it would be employer organizations, namely the RMI, which is the Retail Motor Industry Organization, and the FRA, which is the Fuel Retailers Association. And I gather that most if not all of the people connecting here today would be members of FRA, or some of them anyway. And also on the side of trade union movement, MIBCO is made out of NUMSA and MISA. Those are the four parties to council. Now, MIBCO provides for the following. If I may, I just need to highlight these things, Walter, so that people understand. One, it's ensuring adherence and enforcement of collective agreements concluded by the parties to council. That's very important. We ensure adherence and enforcement of collective agreements that are concluded by parties to council. Those are not concluded by MIBCO staff. The main agreement and the admin agreement and all other agreements are not concluded by the MIBCO staff. They are concluded by the wonderful people that are actually joining us online right now through their organizations, which are parties to council. That's very important to note, because if there is anything of an issue with our main agreement or admin agreement where there is unhappiness, then the only way that can be changed or that can be amended is through the negotiations process when parties enter the negotiation cycle. Number 2, preventing and resolving labor disputes in the motor industry. That is our mandate. And when there is one that we were not able to prevent, the organization or the platform that we use to resolve disputes is the MIBCO DRC, which is the Dispute Resolution Center. Number 3, performing dispute resolution functions by means of Dispute Resolution Center. That's what I've just mentioned now. Part of our resolving and managing of disputes also is through our agents, the Inspectorate Department, and my office as well. We engage with parties. We are able to mediate between parties because the issue is to ensure labor peace in the motor industry. And also providing social benefits for the welfare and stability of employers and employees in the form of the following: Provident Funds, and I have colleagues here, and I have a colleague here who's going to speak more about Provident Funds, what Provident Funds we have at MIBCO. Number 2, Sick, Accident and Maternity Pay Fund, Holiday Pay Funds, Medical Aid Fund through Motor Health, and funeral cover via union membership with MESA and NUMSA. Our fund does not necessarily provide for funeral benefits. That is done via the unions. Our collective agreements that are concluded at MIBCO, right? Basically, we are governed by the collective agreements. Our mandate we get from the collective agreements. That's where we get our powers, and obviously through other legislations, including the Labor Relations Act and other pieces of legislation. But the collective agreements that are concluded between employers and employees are what basically gives us mandate at MIBCO. So that's where we derive our powers from. The main collective agreement, for instance, it governs the conditions of employment in the motor industry. We will talk more about that. It talks about hours of work, bonuses, annual leave, public holidays, and all of those. That's where you find it. It's a very thick document, and to decipher it, you definitely need the expertise of MIBCO and the expertise of the Inspectorate Department especially. We have the admin agreement also that basically gives effect to the main agreement. All right, it is the how. It is the how things are done, how returns are collected, and all of those things. And I don't want to go too much into our agreements because I think this session is going to discuss pertinent issues that parties have or questions that they would have raised. But if you go to our main agreement, it has different aspects that it deals with, and basically I want to assume that people that are joining us here, being fuel dealers, they would be sector 5s. So that is also encapsulated into our collective agreements. It's captured there on what affects sector 5s. So that's basically, I think for now, I want to stop there. There's a lot that one could actually cover, but I think the issues of time, I do not want to basically give a workshop on the main agreement, not unless parties actually require that, and we are more than available to take them through to aspects that are covered by the main agreement, or to decipher what the main agreement is all about. However, just in my closing, before I hand over back to you, I would really love to say that MIBCO is there to service the employer and to service the employees. We cannot at any given point be found to be partisan. We cannot at any given point to be found to be siding with one side and not the other. So essentially what I'm saying is we will never take sides. All we do is we implement what the agreements say, what the collective agreements say. That's where we derive our powers. That's very important for colleagues to know and to note. So, but our doors are always open. We understand that it can be very difficult to understand the MIBCO system and how we work. We understand that it can be very difficult to understand the main agreements, but our teams are there to basically assist anyone, even those who want to register for online returns as well. Our teams are there to take them through baby steps on how that is done. Those who want to understand our legal processes, those who want to understand our claims processes, just to come in and request a meeting with us when there is no animosity, there is no complaint, there is no issue. Just when business is running as usual, we are more than available for people to come through so that we can actually offer that kind of assistance. Over to you, sir.
No, thank you very much for that, and I think it was quite as clear as it could be. And so what I probably would like to also just mention is that part of our discussion here will make normative references to certain parts of the Act. So we will refer to the Labour Relations Act, we will refer to the main collective agreement, we will refer to the main administrative agreement, as Mr. Nyuso has said, and also the Provident Fund agreement as well. So just for everyone who's tuning in to take note of that we may probably not quote the sections from each agreement, but everything that we're going to be discussed today will come from those statutes that I've just mentioned. So probably I will now move on to kickstart with some of the questions that we may have, and I'll allow our panelists to also assist on these. So we would notice that with the main collective agreement, where it goes to the wage section in particular, and that's where most people go, you will notice that the wage section particular mentions the employees, it mentions forecourt attendants, and it mentions cashiers. However, in a fuel service station, you have more people acting in more roles. You have car wash attendants, you have back office administrators, you have site managers, you have people who work the restaurant area as well. So I would like to just also get an understanding to say now, from a practical sense, where looking at how most service stations operate, who is covered by this main collective agreement? So I'll start with you, Navin, and I'll come to Erasmus with that.
Thank you, Walter. Listeners out there, the scope of application in our collective agreements, especially the main agreement, is clear. It's clear in that in the service station environment, those sections that registered separately from the service station, especially in the food environment, don't fall under our jurisdiction, especially the franchise shops like Steers and Wimpy. But our agreement also defines the duties of each of the occupations you mentioned, the forecourt attendant, the char, the cashier, and if dealers go through that, you'll clearly find that the duties of a merchandiser will all fit in those respective grades. So I hope I have answered that question to a certain extent.
I'm not sure if you have anything to add to that, Mr. Erasmus?
Well, car washes, it should be the same entity of the garage, and then they should register with MIBCO. If not, then we don't have jurisdiction over car washes. And cleaners can also wash cars, chars. So they are registered under chars, cleaners.
Okay. So in terms of this demarcation process, I'm not sure if you can give us a little bit of understanding in terms of how that demarcation process works when you want to separate, where do fuel retailers go to when they want to separate these sections that operate in the same service station, so to speak?
Thanks, Walter. Look, it's basically comes down to the employer and the way he sets up his business. The legal entity of that service station will define what it owns. Does it own just the service station, or does it own the car wash as well? For employees to prove that MIBCO doesn't have jurisdiction over a car wash because it's a separate registered company, then he needs to prove that entity is not a part of the legal entity that owns the service station.
Okay. All right. No, thank you very much. I think that is very clear as well. So probably we'll move on to some of the conditions of service. So if you can walk us through the normal working hours, how many hours should employees work in a general when they are working in a service station?
Normal
Yes.
hours, Walter, will be 45 per week. Usually 9 hours shifts with a lunch break after completing of 6 hours of service. A night shift will be paid from 11 o'clock at night at a rate of double the normal rate. Petrol cleaners should complete 45 hours before overtime can be claimed.
And so you're referring to double. So let's say now an employee starts working their first shift on a Monday. They start hour 1 from 6 p.m. and they'll finish at 6 a.m. If you can give us a breakdown of how that employee should be earning at the end of the shift.
They need to, like I said before, they need to work 45 hours, complete 45 hours before overtimes kick in.
Okay.
So after 45 hours, even though it's night shift, the overtime will just kick in after that.
As well. All right. I'm not sure if there's anything that Evan would like to add to that.
Thanks, Walter.
Yeah.
I think what the industry needs to realize is that the normal hours in the industry as defined says that it may not exceed 45. So you can have the normal hours less than 45. But the agreement then goes on to say that if an employer cannot regulate an employee's shift to 45, that employee's shift is deemed to be 45. So basically what it means is that employer must still pay that employee for 45 hours.
For 45 hours. And
That's what it covers.
that speaks to short time, which is something that we're going to come into just shortly as well. But I just want to understand as well, as part of that conversation, the rates of pay that employees would get. Probably I'll come to you, Erasmus, in terms of overtime. I think you've touched on that as well. What kind of rates should employees earn when they're working on a Sunday and vis-a-vis when they're working on a public holiday as well?
Okay, firstly, public holidays will be double the rate. And in Sunday time, if the Sunday is part of the 45 hours, the first 9 hours will be time and a half of the rate, and thereafter double time.
Sure. All right. No, thank you. Thank you very much. I think that also clears up a number of questions. And I'd just like to remind everyone as well that comments and questions are welcome through our chat box. We will be able to accept them and respond to those as well. So I think Mr. Erasmus also touched on the fact that most dealers have been dealing with where night work is concerned, because we've been having quite a few, I think I'd say arguments or healthy debates where some employees thought that they were entitled to a night work allowance even though they're still part of the 45 hours. So I think we've cleared that one up very well. So we will move to now short time, and probably I think it's something that Neven led to in respect to that, and I'll allow you to then also answer on that one in terms of how is short time implemented and what does it actually mean?
Thank you, Walter. Short time, in terms of the agreement, can be worked by employers, but it's only for the purposes of shortage of material and slackness of trade, not because an employer cannot regulate an employee shift.
Sure.
So it's clear in the agreement that only for those reasons an employer can put his employees on short time. It also restricts an employer from putting an employee on continuous short time for more than a day or more than 2, 3, 4 days, weeks or whatever. The agreement clearly says that the employer needs to notify the employee on the day preceding the day that an employee is required will be on short time. So that covers notifying employees. The agreement also goes on to say that if an employer employs his employees on short time in excess of 4 weeks, the employer needs to notify the council in writing. And the agreement defines what sort of information we need. And if short time then exceeds 8 weeks, then the regional council is required to report that to the regional board. MIBCO has regional board meetings once a month, and it's our responsibility then to report for noting at that regional council meeting all employees that have implemented short time exceeding 8 weeks.
And what probably happens and follows from that process, if Mr. Erasmus can take us through, then once the employer has notified MIBCO, what then happens from that process?
Well, if it's notified after 8 weeks, we take it to the council, and the council noted this short time, and an agent will contact the employer to verify that short time is work and genuine.
Yeah. And also I asked this because we've had some service stations that have not been able to recover from level 5 lockdown to date, because it's something that has, I think, harmed a lot of businesses. So when you're speaking to an employer who you would say they've been implementing short term for in excess of 8 weeks, I don't know how many 8 weeks we would count, what would you recommend that they do at this point, that now they're seeing that they're still on short time, employees are still not earning their full 45 hours of work? What would you recommend as a way forward, as a step forward?
Thank you. Very good question. I think what employers need to do from day one is to consult with their employees' organization. It's very important to do that, because at regional council, the parties then says that why doesn't MIBCO convince employers to look at alternatives? And I think the parties would rather ask MIBCO to advise employers to do that. Failing which, the parties themselves will consult with employers. And they may demand retrenching all the staff or other alternatives. So it's important employers do consult with the employees, and especially the trade unions, and firstly the employees' organization.
Okay. No, thank you very much.
I'm sorry.
Sure.
I'm sorry to do this, but I don't want to allow this point to move without us saying this. The issue of short time is a very serious issue with the regional board at this stage. So I'm glad it's a topic that the guys are addressing. The board members, which by the way include both employee organizations and trade unions, are now starting to question perpetual short time. We have companies that, besides looting, besides COVID-19, who have been abusing short time in the eyes of MIBCO, in the eyes of the board, where people have been on short time for 2 years, even beyond. Because now that says it can't be that there is slackness in trade or there is economic problems for 2 years, for 3 years. What are you doing differently to actually come out of that loop? And we have people in terms of employees who then complain to say we are on short time, however business is continuing as usual. So now we are zooming in onto short time. As these guys are saying, we are going to be visiting employers as well to ensure that we see that indeed businesses are struggling. Looting is separate, COVID-19 is separate, those are understandable.
Sure.
Thank you.
All right. No, thank you very much. And you've just led me to the next point, and I think you're most definitely the perfect person to speak on the looting aspect in terms of what is happening in the background from a MIBCO side. So we know that there are sites that are currently not trading, unfortunately, due to the looting experience in July. And we just also like to get a bit of an understanding as to what is currently happening with the MIBCO side. What can employers expect, especially those who have been negatively affected by the looting?
First, I would like to say I think looting affected KZN the most. Yes, Gauteng as well, which includes 2 of our regions there. But KZN was hardest hit. So MIBCO is aware In fact, we had a drive through the inspectorate department where we went out and we did a study and an assessment of companies that were affected. So we do have a report on companies that would have been affected, some partially, but some in a more permanent kind of way, those who are bent down. So we do have an understanding of that. And just to share with this presentation, we did, as MIBCO, also meet and we did engage with the board at head office level about that issue, where MIBCO then at head office level approached the funds, because we are not the funds, approached MIFA to say, could there be any relief that MIFA could actually offer, especially in terms of the Provident Fund aspect of it, which is quite important. We all do understand, number one, that already the agreements of MIBCO make provision that if a person works less than 23 hours in any particular week, that no levies are payable. There is no Provident Fund that's payable, right? So that is taken care of. However, we went a step further to say, but how else can we assist? So there would be a relief that is being looked at, and I believe that MIFA is actually approving that, of giving companies at least up to 6 months relief. However, all of that is subject to, because the fund is governed by the Board of Trustees, and they are governed by the fund rules. So all of that is subject to the Board of Trustees at MIFA level, looking at each and every application on its merits, and then determining whether to give the full 6 months or to give part thereof. Yes, there would be establishments that are permanently damaged. Then it's on that employer also to apply and also give proof in that application that look, I'm permanently damaged, but I still have interest in trading. This is basically how long it's going to take, because it's not just up to the owner; it's also up to the BPs of this world and the SASOs of this world, and whatever their processes. So that is fully understood, but we can just encourage dealers to make sure that they take advantage of this process. MIBCO is going to send a circular as well about this very soon. We are working on that to the industry, to inform the industry of the process to be taken. However, we are also hoping that people have also took advantage of government initiatives that went out, especially during that time. We know that the president put in place quite a few initiatives that government was running. But that's where it is. Thank you.
Okay. No, thank you. Thank you very much. I think that will put a lot of people at ease, knowing that there is some movement with that process. And as Mr. Nyuso said, once that circular is out, we will also share it with all the relevant parties and share all of that information as Petra Connect as well, just to make sure that dealers and employees understand the process to be followed and everyone gets the necessary assistance required. I think also probably I would be committing a crime if I don't ask probably Mr. Erasmus to walk us through now the process of these employees who've experienced the looting, in terms of what would you say should have been their checklist in July, because this was also experienced in July. What would you say they should have done at that point, and if they have not done it, what should they do now to make sure that they don't incur damages?
First of all, if they closed down, they should have notified MIBCO of the fact that they closed down, can't operate, place the employees on short time or layoff, with consultation with employees and unions.
Yes.
Notify MIBCO that they did so. If employees work less than 23 hours in a week, for that week, no contribution will be payable.
Okay. All right. No, thank you. Thank you very much for that. I think probably for dealers who maybe have not consulted or maybe probably would have not informed MIBCO of the fact that they are not trading due to damages, we would also just strongly recommend that you set up consultations with the relevant parties, albeit the employees or their unions, and just make sure that that consultation part is completed before notifying MIBCO of what has happened, just so that we don't want to see a situation when you reopen in 6 months, you have this huge bill waiting for you at MIBCO. So I think it's probably most definitely something that we need to do proactively to avoid issues in future. I'm not sure if before we actually do a change around of the speakers, if there's anything Mr. Erasmus and Mr. Nyuso would like to add on before we change our panel.
I don't know if we with sick pay. Sick pay is only the agreement is only signed by 2 parties of MIBCO, namely the RMI and MISA, the union. So that agreement is only applicable to those employees. So if your members are not RMI members, then sick and accident pay fund will not
be administered by MIBCO.
Yeah.
Okay.
Normal sick leave will then kick in.
Will then apply. Okay. So what he was referring to is to the fact that if employees then ask about whether, because we know that whenever you call MIBCO, they ask about sick pay and when you go on that line. So some employees actually ask if they can claim that from MIBCO. So he was just explaining that fact to say that since they are not part of RMI, they wouldn't necessarily need to have MIBCO administrate that process. So we are going to do a quick change around of our panel because we still have more people who are happy to share more information with you. So if you can just hang tight for a few seconds and then we will resume shortly. All right, good morning again and welcome to our connecting session where we are dealing with MIBCO compliance. We've just had one gentleman join us now. I'll allow him to introduce himself. He will do that and then we'll continue with the session.
Thank you, Walter. I'm Shainul Mohanlal. I'm the Senior Legal Officer for MIBCO KZN.
All right, so when you get legal correspondence from MIBCO, you know who's behind it now. So before we kick off, I'd like to hand over to Nathan for him to explain the exemption process. So we understand that these rules, and we've discussed them in terms of the rules that apply with MIBCO, and so employers may not be able to comply with them for whatever reason. If you can just explain the exemption process and what it exactly means.
Thank you, Walter. The agreements make provisions for an employer to apply for an exemption from any of the provisions of that collective agreement. All right, that's the basic condition in the agreement. Yeah. So if an employer decides that not, I have my own in-house Provident Fund, I need to apply for an exemption, there's a process. Yeah. It explains what forms need to be completed, who it needs to go to, and I think Mr. Nyuswa and Shainul will elaborate on the process with the Provident Fund exemptions. Yeah. Any other conditions of the collective agreement that are not met and the employer wishes to apply for an agreement, that gets tabled at the regional council. I'll elaborate, not necessarily the regional council only, because it might, the wage exemption from the exemptions from the guaranteed increases or not to pay wages on actual earnings, that goes to our national board. There's a wage exemption board established just to deal with those exemptions. For example, an employer wants an exemption to split the annual bonuses. The agreement is clear that when an employee completes a year's service, he must get 2 weeks bonus. So the employer says, I cannot afford to pay everybody 2 weeks bonus at the same time. So the agreement allows that employer to apply for an exemption to split the bonus. For example, pay 1 week when the guys go on leave, 1 week on the anniversary date, or the 1 week in December. So that's what it is. And employers must make sure, please ensure that when you guys bring an application for an exemption, must be done on a company letterhead, detailing exactly what they want. Proof of consultation is very important because the parties will ask Have the employees been consulted? Have they agreed?
Yeah.
So all that's necessary and relevant when it comes to the exemptions. The wage exemption is normally done on whenever the council's agreement is negotiated. When the minister signs agreement and extends it for 3 years, then the agreement says that the effective date of the wage increases, an employer on that date, an employer has the right to apply for an exemption from the guaranteed increases. The agreement says that if an employer cannot afford to pay the guaranteed increase, or in certain sectors the increase on actual earnings, he's got 21 days in which to apply for the exemption. When it comes, let's deal with the fuel sector. There could be two scenarios. One is if there's forecourt attendants earning above the new published minimum wage, and the agreement compels that employer now to implement a guaranteed increase, that application for exemption will go to the national board, the wage exemption board. If an employer has implemented the last wage increase in March, and now cannot afford to implement the September increase, and wishes to pay the employees on the previous minimum wage, effectively that means he wants to pay less than the minimum wages. That application has got to go to the regional board. And there's very strict conditions as to what the application should look at. Mr. Nuyasa will guide us on the entire process in terms of not audited financials and all the stuff. So that's the basic principles when it comes to exemptions.
Okay. So I'd just like to ask this question on a point that you've also just mentioned, which I think is critical. So for me as an employer, before I come to MIBCO to apply for this exemption, the prerequisite is that my employees should have agreed to that. To support that. So if my employees do not agree, I cannot then approach MIBCO.
The conditions in the agreement says that the employer must supply proof of consultation.
Sure.
It doesn't say that employees must agree.
Okay.
So even if the employees don't agree, as long as there's proof of consultation, the board will make that decision,
Will make the decision
whether to
on
grant
their
or
behalf.
not to grant.
All right, sure. No, thank you.
Thank
Thank you very much. Mr. Nyuso, I think Naven led to you in terms of what do you, as you sit as the regional secretary, you receive all of these applications. So when you receive an application of this nature, what are the key things that you look into that you believe for you would or should help the employer's case or the employee's case?
No, absolutely. Thank you. I think when I'm done, I would like Navin to deal with the set of clause as well. It's going to assist companies. I don't want to deal with that because I think you've asked a pointed question. Let me deal with your question.
Sure.
So I think there is a standard. I will deal with the wage exemption. Shana will deal with Provident Fund exemptions.
Yeah.
There is a standard form that we send to employers. I cannot stress this enough, Walter, to the guys out there. Please do not assume we know. Do not assume we have the information. Do not assume we know your business. Be as thorough as possible as you are filling that form, because that form has got to be duly filled. Do not refer us to financials. Do not refer us to annexures or separate. If ever there's a question, for instance, one of the questions that are in that form is the employer needs to motivate the application, right? You need to supply that motivation. Whether you are supplying it on the form in writing, but the space there might not be enough. So most employers rightfully would then type it out on the letterhead and sign it through. Give us a full picture. Motivate the application, because the people that will take a decision on your application do not work with your business. Do not say, well, because of looting, so I'm making this application, period. Assuming that a person reading the application understands how looting affected your business. Because if we can be honest with ourselves, looting affected different businesses differently in different areas. So not everyone was affected the same. So the board will then look at that and also be asking themselves a question whether or not this person applying, the applicant, is using looting as an excuse. So you've got to then supply documentation. So what is looked at, number one, is the form has got to be properly filled in and signed by all that needs to be signed. All the information that's in the form must be supplied. All the annexures and support documentations must be supplied. Secondly, I've dealt with the issue of it being properly motivated. Okay. Thirdly, you've got to then give us an understanding of any wage increases that you might have effected in the recent past, with the employees. That I think Navon will deal with as well. It might affect a set-off clause. Because there are some wage exemptions that we receive that do not necessarily need to be submitted to us, because a company could just, for instance, there are periods when MIBCO had a lapse agreement and there was no agreement. But employers, there are good employers out there, must applaud you, good employers. I'm applauding you. There are some good employers out there who went ahead and effected increases for their employees, understanding the economical effects that the economy has and the social standing, socio-economic factors that households have. So they went ahead and effected increases. So when it's now when it comes time now where we have an effective main agreement, then you find a space where you can actually effect that set of clause. But he will explain how that works. So thirdly, you all employees that are affected, because not all employees might be affected in that exemption, right? So all employees that are affected, some people might be earning way above what the minimums are and what the actuals and the guaranteed increases equate to. But all employees that are affected by that wage exemption application must sign on the form. Must sign, like Navin said, to say we were consulted. But their signatures have got to be there. Because it cannot be that you can just write people's names and their ID numbers and that is enough. So you must show that at least people did sign. Even if people did not necessarily agree, but people must sign, right? And then you've got to have proof of consultation, essentially. See, consultation, if I can put it this way to you, Walter, proof of consultation, the way we view it at MIBCO, it's not a meeting where the employer informs employees that I am not going to give you increases. Because sometimes we get things that are written on letterheads where you clearly see that an employer is simply informing employees that I am, because of my financial hardships, I'm not going to be effecting increases, sign here. That's not consultation. Consultation is you are taking your employees into your confidence and showing them what effects, whatever issues are, slackness in trade and everything has had on the business, and therefore you do not, number one, you don't want to lay off people, you don't want to retrench, you still want to keep jobs, but you cannot effect the guaranteed or actual increases. So this is basically the route you are taking, and you engage them. So you've got to then supply us with minutes of that meeting, right? And please, for establishments where there are trade unions, the NUMSAs and the MISAs of this world, right? Shop stewards must also sign on that consultation. Right? It's only those that do not have a presence of a trade union that we accept, and we have records of that. Okay. Okay. Then, if I can just quickly go through, because for different types of organizations, in terms of financials, it differs. For PTY registered companies, one, we need the recent past 3 years audited financial statements, right? Recent past 3 years. Don't give us 2010. Okay, because you are trying to prove that, look, you can check financially how I've been affected over the past 2 years. PT-wise, again, you need also to fill in the projected cash flows and the budget for the company. On the financial statements, we're talking about signed audit reports and detailed income statements must be there. Okay. For the closed corporations, we need the past 2 years on audited financial statements. They need to submit to the registrar of CC officer as well, and also signed off by accounting office. The accounting officer has got to sign those financial statements. Now, on the sole proprietary, I'm not so sure we have those in Sector 5. On the sole proprietary, the latest audited financial statements, which is past 2 years audited cash flow, and sworn affidavits confirming the correctness of the financials. Okay. Now, all the pages of the financials must be accounted for. You can't have pages that are missing. Basically, your financials are mostly numbered. Now, if we see that page 7 is missing or page whatever is missing, it tells us that there is some information you don't want us to see. So all of them must be accounted for. And also a detailed income statement of every financial information submitted. Okay. So basically all the financial projections, all the financial information that are supporting your application must be part of the application. But please, if I may, Naven spoke of 21 days and all of those time frames that are in our agreements. Please do not wait for the last day. If you can help it, you know when an agreement or is in effect, you know when the window opens, and you know that you are going through hardships. You are not going to only start then to get audited. You have your audited financials already. Yes, we understand there might be delays because of COVID with your accountants and all of that, but most of the information you actually have. That's why you are saying you can't afford. So now don't wait until the very last day and then be calling us and telling us that you need an extension, because you would have had ample time to respond to us. That allows us time as well. If you give it to me at 11:59 on the last day, I don't really have enough time in the region, especially if I need to submit it to the wage exemption board. I don't have enough time. I have a small window to deal with your application, and also to advise you if there is missing information or if there is information you need to beef up on. So give us that. Don't allow yourself to submit on the last day. Thank you.
Sure. All right. No, thank you. Thank you very much for that, Mr. Nyoswa. I think you've mentioned the set of clause, and I'll allow Naven to comment on that one.
Thank you. Walter, I think what we need to first understand is that the previous wage increase that was gazetted was effective 1 September 2018, and that agreement expired on the 31st of August 2019. So from 2019 up to March this year, we never had a collective agreement. So effectively, a lot of dealers, a lot of companies in the motor industry effected wage increases anyway. So when we had an agreement published this year, it published the minimum wages and it published the guaranteed increase for employees earning above. So some of the employees would have done that March increase, or some of them would have said, no, I'm not doing that because I gave an increase last year when I shouldn't have. And come September, with this increase, there are companies as well saying, hold on, I've given increases 2 years, 2019 when I shouldn't have, and 2020 when I shouldn't have. So they've taken the 2019 increase, they've offset it against March, and they've taken the 2020 increase and they've offset it against the September increase. Offsetting means whatever rand value of the increase given is offset against the rand value that's required now.
Yeah.
That's only if employees are earning above the new minimum. So, for example, the minimum wage for forecourt attendance is 36.10, am I right? And if come 1 September, there are dealers that are paying their forecourt attendance above 36.10, the employer then is not compelled to pay the guaranteed increase. He can then take whatever increase is given to the lapse period and offset it against that difference.
Yeah.
That's basically what offsetting means.
And so for how long can they offset, and do they need to notify MIBCO of this as well?
Well, what employers need to note is that you cannot offset the wage increase more than one occasion.
Okay.
So if you're given 100 Rand increase last year and the guaranteed increase now is say 50 Rands, you want to offset that against September, the 1st September 2021. That doesn't mean there's a balance of 50 Rand that you can keep aside to offset it against the next wage increase. You can only offset it once.
Yeah.
So look, the parties, our agreement lapse, it comes to an end next year. So the parties will probably start renegotiating a new 3-year agreement. And I think employers need to note that do not wait for the very last minute, as Mr. Nyaswa said, to submit your application for wage exemptions.
Yeah.
What I can say is that the September increase that we just came into now,
Yeah.
MIBCO did send out a circular early, I think in July, August, and the 21 days we've received not a lot of applications, but whatever applications were received were dealt with. However, the council, I think there were parties to the council that complained that a lot of employees did not receive those circulars, so the council resubmitted the circular and extended the deadline. What I'm going to say now is that deadline has come and gone for this year.
Yeah.
So, but the agreement only has that deadline for the guaranteed increase for employees earning above the minimum wage. The issue about the minimum wage still discussed. That we're waiting for a legal opinion on whether application can still be entertained. But that would be those applications not to pay minimum wages.
Okay. All right. No.
Okay.
All right. Thank you very much for that. And I probably would like for you to also explain to us, probably something that we should have also explained in the beginning, is the role of agents, because sometimes dealers just see these guys coming into their workplaces. What is the role of agents, and what are the powers given to agents?
Thank you, Walter. I think, when the minister signed that certificate of registration of a bargaining council, the council had to establish its own minimum terms and conditions. The inspector division is then established to enforce those conditions. So that's clear in section Schedule 10, read with Section 33 of the Labour Relations Act. The main agreement also covers the duties of an agent and the powers of an agent. So effectively what it means is that the inspector's role is not to police the industry out. It's just to ensure that the industry out there is complying with all the rules and regulations. So it applies to both employers and employees. Give it an example would be if an employee walks out without giving notice, the employer has every right to contact MIBCO and say, I want to claim the notice pay from the employee. This employee walked out without giving notice. Same applies for an employee. An employee has the right to walk to MIBCO and say, my employer fired me without giving me notice. I'm claiming notice pay. So that's basically the job of an agent, is to enforce, to investigate, to ensure that the industry complies. So what happens is, on an annual basis, an employer will get a call from the inspectorate to state that not to schedule an inspection. So that would mean that the agent would visit the employer, firstly inspect the records, to check minimum wages, deductions, if all employees are registered, Provident Fund deductions, if it's in line with what we have on record. Once that's done, then the agent will then request to go into the workshop or forecourt in the fuel sector to interview employees. And they're compelled, in terms of our standard operating procedures, to interview at least 10% of the workforce. So once that's done, then the agent will should give the employer feedback of what the anomalies are, or if there's any anomalies, feedback of what the findings are of an audit. In most cases, we have employers that disagree with the agents, and then the next thing the employer gets is a compliance letter issued by the inspector. And that's when channel comes in, because what happens then is the inspector would do an assessment. For example, either there's 10 or so unregistered employees, backdate the MIBCO returns, his returns ends up inflated by 200-300%. Then there's an underpayment of wage assessment as well, where the agent has asked the employer to please correct the employee's earnings and to back pay. So the compliance is served. 7 days has passed and should pass before we refer the matter to legal. So it's important that the employer does contact the agent or the inspector within those 7 days and try and resolve those.
Sure.
So that's, in a nutshell, what the inspector does.
Okay. No, thank you very much for that in-depth also response in terms of that. So before we move over, I just noted that there was someone who sent me a question directly to my cell phone. So if anyone is having troubles with the comment section, you may send it to anyone within our organization. They'll be able to forward that question to me as well. So the particular question that I've received is with regards to bonus exemptions. So when an employer is saying that I can pay the rate that is required by the employees for the rate. However, I cannot pay the bonus at the end of the year. What is the process where that is concerned?
It's a very good question.
You want to answer?
Yeah, very good question. It's that's why there's a pause a little bit, because again we are in that loop of COVID-19 looting being used as reasons for all of those things. Yeah. I can tell you now that prior to COVID-19 and prior to this scourge of looting, the regional board of MIBCO KZN frowned upon employers that would want not to pay bonuses. In fact, I don't remember ever since I started in 2017 where even one was approved, because the argument is the employer has ample time during the year to actually put that in place and to prepare for that, and there is no possible reason why employers would actually be saying they can't pay bonuses. But now we are in a new world. There is COVID-19, there was looting, and I think when Navin was dealing with the issue of exemptions, he also mentioned that clause 8.1 of the main agreement makes provision that an employer can apply for exemption against any clause in the main agreement, right? Over and above, aside from wage, aside from minimum wage, aside from actual and guaranteed increases, and aside from Provident Fund that he's going to deal with, any other clause the employer may apply for exemptions. Yes. So basically, there is a provision for that, and like any exemption, it will be scrutinized to see whether or not indeed it has merits. So it will be applied, that will be sent to the regional board, and the board would actually then consider that.
Okay. All right. No, thank you very much. So now I'll move to the gentleman sitting right next to me.
Sure.
Because I know you've been sitting here for quite some time. So if you can explain the Provident Fund side of things, and just to also explain to people who may not know what the Provident Fund is, how it actually works from an employer-employee perspective as well.
Look, I'm going to get into the Provident Fund exemption more. I'll also call on the assistance of our funds supervisor in respect of explaining more on the Provident Fund.
Yeah.
But with regards to exemptions and contributing to the Provident Fund, I can confirm that it is not a obligatory fashion that employers need to contribute to the motor industry funds. And it's for that purpose that the exemption process exists, and the legal department for KZN is the custodian of that exemption process. with regards to the Motor Industry Provident Fund and Auto Workers Provident Fund, you would note, and employers would note, that there's a mandatory contribution in terms of employees and employers. It's a maximum of 7.5% employee contribution and a minimum of 8% employer contribution. Should an employer not wish to utilize the funds that are provided by MIBCO, which is the industry funds, they are welcome to make an application for exemption, and there are several funds within the industry that have successful exemptions where employers go to. What they would be required to do is make a formal application to the legal department. There are a set of forms that will be needed to be completed, and these come with a range of requirements and attachments that need to be submitted along as well. Firstly, we need to ensure that the alternate fund is a secure fund that's been operating within its own industry, and that it's not something that will collapse at any given point in time. So it needs to have FSB approvals and certificates as well. With that fund, we'll also need to confirm various aspects on benefits, because it is important to note that your benefits cannot, on the alternate fund, be lower than the required benefits on the motor industry requirements. So as I mentioned, there'd have to be at least a maximum of a 7.5% contribution from employee, minimum of 8% by the employer. It needs to comply with the death requirements in terms of benefits to employees, families, also ill health, injury as well. And once we receive the same, we'll make note on the special rules and general rules of the alternate funds, and the idea with the legal department would be within 30 days, provided that all documentation is provided in the exemption application, that we are giving a response to the employer on whether that fund is able to get an exemption certificate, or whether it will be required it would be declined and allow the employer to go back and revise with that fund, whether they need to make certain amendments to be compliant. So if you are in a position where that exemption application is declined, it does not mean that the employer is then prohibited from exemption. They can go back and revise certain aspects that we would allude to as the reasons for that decline. Anything else that's important with regards to the same? Oh yes, there's in the application form, employers can contact the legal department at MIBCO KZN. We'd provide them with the necessary information. There's fund fact sheets which they need to take back to their alternate fund that they wish to move to. And it's important for employers to take note of that fund fact sheet, because that will be a very clear indicator immediately with what they currently have in place, because we do have companies where they've already got a fund in place when they come into the industry, and that will easily advise you by looking at the fund fact sheet and doing an easy comparison whether or not that fund is going to be exempted or not. I would suggest that rather than an employer making an exemption where he sees that his fund is not applicable and is not meeting the necessary requirements, I would always suggest that they first go revise with their fund and advise them on a basic comparison. This is what MIBCO requires, and this is what we are offering, and work on that before an application is made. That would it would eliminate a lot of delays on both the employer side and on MIBCO side, and it would also eliminate a lot of the to and fro that's required in respect of the same as well.
Right. All right. No, thank you. Thank you very much for that. We are going to take another few. Sorry, before we do.
I apologize. I just need to concretize this so that colleagues understand. The MIBCO Provident Fund, right, is essentially a must for employers, right, who do not have an alternate fund that meets the requirements that Shayna has furnished now. So if you do not have it, and you do not have an exemption with MIBCO, the system, I need this to be clear. The MIBCO system returns system is going to charge you as if you are paying into MIBCO up until you get an exemption from MIBCO. So I just wanted to be clear that you don't have endless amounts of time to be setting your house in order. When the inspectorate registers you, right, at that point, one of the things they deal with is, do you have, okay, not do you have, you need to be on a MIBCO Provident Fund. And then the employer would say, no, actually, I have one already in-house. Oh, okay, if you do, then apply for an exemption. And like Chanel has said, look at our fact sheets. Pumi will elaborate on that. Look at our fact sheet. Does your fund meet the requirements for an exemption? Right? So basically, that needs to be clear as well. That if your fund, because if your fund does not meet his requirements, and you spend a year or two trying to sort yourself out, MIBCO system is going to continuously be charging you and charging you interest. And that's where you have employers saying, but why am I owing so much? It's because you don't have an exemption. The only time it stops charging is when you have an exemption, and then there's a period now, right, that you are not in the system, that you now have to look at, that we have to consider for condonation. But the guys that are registered and don't have an in-house fund cannot be saying to the inspectorate, no, sorry, MIBCO, I don't want your fund, I'm going to be looking for my own. No, you are, by main agreement, you need to register your employees on the MIBCO fund, not unless you have your own.
Okay.
Thank you.
No, thank you very much for that. We will take a few seconds also to just change our panel as well. There are some speakers as well still available coming in from different sides from MIBCO. So if you can just give us a few seconds, we will be back here shortly. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good day and welcome back to our session where we are decoding MIBCO Compliance. We have shared quite a lot of information to this point, and we've added a few team members who will help us decode other aspects of MIBCO Compliance as well. So I will allow them to introduce themselves first, and then we will proceed from there.
My name is Pumi Sitole. I'm the fund supervisor at MIBCO. I'm the one who's dealing with the Provident Fund.
Good morning, Walter. Good morning, everybody out there. My name is Daniel Sage. I'm the credit control supervisor for KZN. Thank you.
All right. No, thank you very much, Pumi and Daniel. So we would like to let me start with you, Pumi. If you can explain the entire Provident Fund scenario and situation, how does it work, the ins and outs, just a basic intro of that section.
Okay. Thanks, Walter. MIBCO have their own Provident Fund. Our Provident Fund is administered by MIRFA, which is MIRF. MIRF means Motor Industry Retirement Funds. MIRF administers two funds according to the grades that we have in the motor industry. The first one is Auto Workers Provident Fund, which covers the grade 1 to grade 6. The second one is Motor Industry Provident Fund. That includes the grade 7 and the grade 8 in our industry. That is all the apprentices and all the workers or other workers in the motor industry. Walter, in our industry, once the member is registered with the employer, it is compulsory for all our employees to contribute towards the Provident Fund. As long as their scope is within, currently it's 205,443 rand 30 cents. So all the employees who are registered, it is compulsory to contribute towards our Provident Fund. Our Provident Fund is a defined contribution fund, which means the employer and the employee must contribute towards the Provident Fund monthly. The employer contributes 8% and the employee contributes 7.5%, which is a total of 15.50% monthly towards the retirement, risk benefit, and the admin costs of our fund. In our industry, once you are a member, you have the benefits in our Provident Fund. The first one will be the retirement, which is most importantly. When you retire, we will pay out what you've been contributing and what your employer has been contributing monthly towards your Provident Fund. The next one will be the retrenchment. As we know, we've been through the looting. Some of our employees have been retrenched. That is one of the benefits that we have. We'll pay out what you've been contributing in our Provident Fund. The third one is the withdrawal. Should it happen that you are dismissed at work or you resigned and you are changing the employer, you can withdraw your funds. We transfer your funds to you, and you also have an option not to pay directly to your bank account, but we can transfer your funds to another funds that you may select with other financial services or with other brokers. In our retirement age is 65 years. Once you reach 65, you can retire. However, we have the early retirement, which is at the age of 55. Some of our employees may feel that they are still fit after the age of 55. They may urge the employer to continue working until the age of 70. But that is within the consent of the employer. If the employer feels that you are still fit enough to continue, then you can contribute until the age of 70. After the age of 70, you may not contribute towards our Provident Fund. The benefit that you may also have is death in service benefit. Should it happen that you die or you pass away while you're still working in our industry, we also pay the amount of 3 times of your annual salary plus the fund credit. Fund credit is the amount that you and the employer have been contributing monthly towards your Provident Fund. We also have the disability benefit, which is the same amount of 3 times annual salary plus the fund credit. What I would like to emphasize on that in-service benefit, Walter, is as MIBCO, we face the challenge. I'm making an example that I'm working in Joburg. My dependents are staying in KZN. How would MIBCO know that I've got dependents in KZN? We have the form called a nomination form or beneficiary form that the employers may have or is also available on our website. We urge all the employees and the employers to assist all the members to complete the nomination form every year. That to assist MIBCO, how do we allocate your benefits if you pass away? Should it happen also for our members to change their relationship or the ones to change the beneficiary, they must advise MIBCO that now I want to change my beneficiaries from this to this member now. In our nomination form, we also cater the minor kids. Those who are still at the age of less than 18, you still have a chance to nominate them. There must be someone who will be looking after those kids. You give us the contact numbers of your beneficiaries or your nominees and the percentage that you'd like MIBCO to pay out directly to them when we are no longer. or you passed away. One of the benefits we have also is the collateral for housing loan. If you are still working within MIBCO, MIBCO have arranged with Standard Bank to assist our employees or our members with the housing loans. The minimum that you can take is 5,000 and the maximum is 70% of your fund credit. You contact any Standard Bank branch and ask for housing loan department, they will assist our members. Within our benefits, we also have a sick and accident maternity fund. For our members, when they go for maternity or they are sick during the working hours, we pay out those benefits. You don't lose your salary, but we pay out that sick accident fund. We also have the annual holiday pay, which is for the grade 7 and the grade 8 employees. Currently, within our Provident Fund, we have a membership of over 206,000 members, with the current total asset of 12.77 billion. So that is our Provident Fund. And we are available at MIBCO to assist you with any queries that you may would like us to assist you with Provident Fund. Our funds information is available on our website, which is www.mirf.co.za, and we are also available in KZN. Our contact number for our KZN branch is 031-274-0644, and our call center number is 086-1664-226. You are more than welcome. We will assist you regarding the Provident Funds.
We will move on to Shane. I'll ask you a few questions. In terms of now, we understand that some dealers do buy service stations which are already trading, and the state of these service stations may not be known to them at the time of the purchase. So what would you recommend that dealers look into from now a MIBCO side before purchasing a service station?
Sure. Look, when it comes to purchasing an existing station, I think there's two principal issues that you want to consider. Number one, you want to obviously consider compliance, and that service stations compliance within the industry. And then the other thing you want to consider is the employees, because in every instance there's always a takeover of employees from the new owner from the old existing station. In respect of your compliance, you want to make sure with that employer and with that company that you're taking over that they were paying over in respect of your provident funds, right? That they want to ensure with them that they were compliant, especially up to date, because if you find that the person's not, there's going to be undoubtedly a lot of arrears that are attributed to that account, as well as you're going to find things like interest as well, which you want to not have to take over as a burden as the person purchasing that site. The other thing you want to confirm is that that employer has had things like pay slips in place with employees and contracts of employment as well. Those are the basic stuff that you're going to need from the enforcement stand of view. And then with regards to employees, you're also going to want to confirm with that employer on takeover that there isn't issues where there was non-compliance of minimum wages and aspects of leave and additional holiday pay that had not been paid over to certain staff members that were there. That's the important things that you want to ensure that that person going out has at least settled that off, or as a new employer or the new person taking over, you have a good appreciation for that, so that if you are purchasing that, you can incorporate that within your sale agreement as well, so that you're not taking on something that you do not understand, and then you find that there's compliance notices and stuff that come through your way after the next 5 or 6 months, or the last thing you want to do as an employer is find legal coming after the employer down the execution route because of something that's been in existence for the last 2 years as well. So that, I think, would be my advice under the circumstances.
Sure. And what would you say now to existing dealers who are currently trading? They wish to comply, but they have this bill that MIBCO updates on a monthly basis.
Sure.
What is the way forward in terms of that? So now let's say paint a scenario of an employer who's not deducting from the employees and it's not being paid over. What is the way forward where that is concerned to ensure that employees get their full benefits?
Look, I'm going to split that up into 2 aspects. Firstly, if an employer is not deducting, it's very clear on where the agreement is at this point in time that should be a new business, and at discovery of that new business by inspectorate, you will, through the employees, be given an opportunity for the employee to waive the employer's failure to make those deductions at that point in time. There really isn't a excuse on an employer's side that they were not deducting if they are in existing operations within the council at this point in time. The other side of it, in terms of compliance, although at legal we are mandated to deal with compliances that have come through where employers have not worked on things, and there is a DRC process that we follow in terms of going after the employer for that enforcement, trying to obtain settlements and stuff. It's very important to note that we are an organization that sits between the employer and the employee. We are not trying to close businesses down. Our mandate is to ensure compliance, and with that in mind, we will always try to work with the employer with regards to ensuring that compliance. There is a process whereby myself and both the supervisor for credit control will bring employees in. We'll have a look at the employer with regards to where his debt is and what he's able to do in order to come up to current and to make sure that he is compliant. So we will look at possibly taking on a settlement proposal from the company. And with that settlement proposal, once myself and Daniel have worked through that, we will take that to our regional secretary. And he will make a determination on whether or not that is something that he can accept or not, or whether we need to go back to the drawing board with the employer. What I want to stress here is that when we're doing a compliance and we want to do a settlement agreement or a proposal with an employer, it cannot be firstly an open-ended agreement whereby the employer takes years to settle these. These need to be dealt with very sensitively, because we generally would result in employees who've left the employer of the company and they are then hounding on the doors of MIBCO, needing their Provident Fund monies, especially in times of these where there's been the looting and COVID. You find a lot of people are now unemployed and they need those Provident Fund monies to live as well. You'll find that if the employer is willing to only pay over 2 or 3 or 4 years, it's not going to be something that the employee can live with or accept at the same time. And that's when we find the pension fund adjudicator coming to the doors of MIBCO saying, what's going on here? We need to know why is MIBCO not proceeding with processes here. So that's why we need to obviously ensure that it's a sensitively done process. It needs to be, the arrears need to be eradicated as soon as possible. So at times you'll find that something that has been submitted by the employer is not going to be acceptable, and we'll need to go back and forward before we can reach something that's agreed. Once we do, a settlement agreement, the proposal will be then drafted into a settlement agreement, which will be signed off by myself and the regional secretary for MIBCO, and this will be then taken off to the DRC, where it will be then concluded before a commissioner. Now the employer is then required to ensure that he complies with that, because it is a settlement agreement, and where there's a non-compliance, then we will have to go down the execution route again in that respect. All right, I hope that answers that.
Sure. No, thank you very much. Let me move over to Daniel for a second, because I know that he deals mostly with the levies and the calculations and everything. So if you can just take us through the calculations that go behind all of this and the interest rates and all of that as well.
Thank you, Walter. Before I go to that, I just want to educate employers out there, especially how to register with MIBCO. I don't see that's been covered yet, but it's part of that process. And it's very important that companies familiarize themselves with the MIBCO internet, with our website, which is www.mibco.org.za. Pumi mentioned the Motor Industry Fund's website. But on our website, there's a lot of questions there that are raised amongst all companies that can be answered just by going into our website. There's also circulars that are pertinent to the industry. There's circulars that come out all the time, so companies must familiarize themselves with that so they keep up to date with what's ever happening in the industry. There's also how does the employer register with us? There's an Annexure A, which is our application form to join MIBCO. So that is the start process of when a company is first joining MIBCO, is how do they register? They will register on that document. It's available on our website, okay? That Annexure A, once completed, there's an email address on there. It will go to Naven's department. The inspectorate then will get hold of the employer and say, now we have registered you, and we now need to get the information of who your employees are so that we can register them on the MIBCO system. Now that's when the calculation of contributions come in. So once the company is registered with us, they will be given a unique employer number. All those employees will be given a council number as well. That council number stays with them right throughout their life in the motor industry. So if they leave one company and they go to another company, that same council number is there. So there's always a record kept of where that person has been in the motor industry. So now once we've registered the company, we will then capture the employees' details on there, and specifically very important is their earnings. Okay. Now before I come to the contribution, also on our website under circulars, MIBCO works on a MIBCO calendar. And it looks similar to a normal calendar, but it's actually not. MIBCO splits the year up into, the 12 months into 52 weeks. Okay? And if you go into our website and look at that MIBCO calendar, you will see MIBCO works with a 4 and a 5 week month. And it's specifically also the salaries when we capture them at weekly, because we work out all our contributions on weekly salary. It's fine that the employer gets paid monthly. It's easy to work out. The system will do it automatically for you. So it takes times 12 divided by 52 weeks is to give a weekly wage. And then based on the weekly wage, we will then calculate the contributions. Now the contributions work as this. If you've got a certain number of employees, they're earning a weekly salary, we've captured them there. And I will use the example of a person earning 1,000 Rand a week. And I'm going to use that because it's easy to calculate, and employees understand it better as well. So the first contribution that is on that MIBCO statement, we call it a forecast before it becomes a return, is council levies. Now council levies is fixed at 6 Rand 28 per week, the total figure. Of that, the employer pays 50%, which is 3 Rand 14, and the employee pays 3 Rand 14. So whatever that person's salary, that council levy is not linked to their salary, it's a fixed amount that is calculated weekly. All right, and then you get your Provident Fund contributions, which my colleagues have already alluded to as 15.5%. So if there's a person that's earning 1,000 Rand a week, 15.5% of that will equate to 155 Rand. Okay, if you break it down further, the 8% and the 7.5%, 8% would be 80 Rand of that 155, and 7.5% would be 75 Rand. The two together is 155. Okay, that portion you will then take, as well as the council levies. Everything is times the number of weeks in the month. So if it's a 4-week month, it'll be 155 times 4, which will get your Provident Fund contributions. Okay, so that's how the Provident Fund is calculated. Then you, obviously, if you have union members, there's 2 unions, as my colleagues have alluded to. It's MISA, the Motor Industry Staff Association. That is worked on, 27 Rand a week. It's paid by the employer. Okay, then you get NUMSA. Their contributions is based on 1% of the person's weekly salary. Okay, and then you get the Sick and Accident Fund and the AHP contributions. All right, so if that applies to that company, the system will automatically calculate everything for the employer. The employer will then get a statement, a forecast. The employer will look at that forecast, and I'll just tell you how the MIBCO calendar runs. You don't pay in advance, you pay in arrears. Okay? So, for instance, now hypothetically, you've registered with us on the 1st of November. Your first payment to MIBCO will be due on the 10th of the following month. So, you will get a statement in the first week of November. You will check that statement. You will see, has MIBCO correctly calculated your wages? Is there maybe a staff member missing, an employee that's missing or not on there? You will then inform us, hey, MIBCO, this is not right. If you agree with it, and it will calculate the figure for you. If you agree with it, by the 10th of the following month, you will make that payment to MIBCO. All right? MIBCO then still gives you another 5 days before we start charging interest. Because it can happen that on the 10th that you pay, and we bank with Standard Bank, if you're not banking with Standard Bank, it will take 2 working days for that payment to reach us. So if you pay on the 10th, and it could also be that there's a public holiday. So we now give you another 5 days for that payment to be in our bank account. If on the night of the 15th, that payment is not in our bank account, you will be charged interest from the 15th. Okay? Do you want me to get into how interest is calculated?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
So how interest is calculated, it's on the 15th, it's 1.5% based on the council levies and the Provident Fund. So that 1.5% that's charged daily is also charged in terms of the Pension Funds Act. MIBCO doesn't have a mandate to reverse Provident Fund interest. Okay, so if employees out there are thinking when we charge interest that it's coming to MIBCO pockets, it's not coming to MIBCO pockets. 90% of that interest goes to the motor industry funds administrators. They then pay that interest over to your to the employees. And why that is so critical is that if you do not pay your pension fund timeously to the council, those employees will lose out on benefits. And you know the funds get invested on different fund structures and all that time. So if you don't pay on time, those people are losing out on benefits. Okay? So when we talk about interest being debit, 90% of that interest is on Provident Fund. Okay? And that money MIBCO doesn't keep, it gets paid over to the funds administrators. Now in terms of what can happen if you default and don't pay by the 15th, all right? Credit Control Department will contact you. We have ladies working that will contact you to say why you haven't paid. It could be that your returns haven't been submitted on time, but we deal with that and we try and help you as best to work through any issues that you have. You will also get sent automated reminder letters. If by the end of the 60-day period you still haven't paid us, a final demand letter will get sent out. At the end of 90 days, that matter then will be referred to Inspectorate for the inspector to issue a compliance notice. It means that you failed to comply with contributions. Once that compliance notice has been served and the period has expired, and we've given the employer a certain period to pay that in, that matter then will be referred to the legal department. Eventually, the employer will receive a notice to appear at the DRC to show in front of the commissioner why he's failed to pay his account. Okay, that's it in a nutshell. But the side effects of not paying your contributions, and remember that R6.28 is for the council. That is for us to pay salaries and to pay to make sure that we can provide a service to employer and employees, and especially in terms of the DRC, because we have to get commissioners in to settle wage disputes and that type of thing. So it's critical that MIBCO charges that council levy. In terms of Provident Fund, the minute the employee doesn't get the benefit of that Provident Fund contribution, it means that he's losing out on benefits. And we have serious issues where employees have come to MIBCO, like Pumi has rightly said, asking where are our monies. We need to survive and that type of thing. And then the employees get frustrated if time after time they're coming to us and we say the company is not compliant. And these kind of cases then end up going to the pension funds adjudicator, they end up going to their lawyers and all that type of thing. So I think my message for employees out there is communicate with us. The better you communicate with us and come to us timeously so that we can help you, it will save us a lot of pain. And employees, when they get upset, I promise you, it's not nice to see these kind of things coming through. So yeah, that's my part. But as I said, communication is the best way to deal with these things.
Right. No,
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that, Daniel. I'll come back to Chanel here with regards to compliance orders. So now, when these monies are outstanding, how does that process work now coming from you from a legal side of things?
Sure. So when the employer receives a compliance notice, that would definitely come from the inspectorate department. That would have been based on an
Inspections, yeah.
or records that are kept and noticed to have been out of or behind by the company. As my colleague David mentioned earlier, you would get a 7-day period by the employer to negotiate with the inspectorate department on where things are to correct that issue. You will find that if that 7 days is not utilized by the employer to sort the issue out or to negotiate with inspectorate, the inspectorate department will do a referral over to legal. So once that matter is then with legal, we receive the referral documentation from inspectorate, and then we'll start making processes. We will initially reach out to the employer in terms of the alternate dispute resolution to determine with the employer whether they did receive the compliance, and if they did so, what are they wanting to do with it, especially if they have not received it. However, if we do not receive a response from the company, we will then need to refer that over to the DRC, the Dispute Resolution Commission. What happens from there is that the matter will then be set down for the CONAB process, where we will ask a commissioner to sit down before at the DRC, and we'll sit before the commissioner with the employer, and we'll make determinations on whether we can reach a settlement agreement, whether the employer would like to consent to an award, or whether there is in fact a dispute that needs to be determined here. If the employer and MIBCO cannot come to a compromise here, the matter would most probably go to an arbitration, and at the arbitration, it depends on whether the matter is resolved or not. If it comes to that point where the council obtains an award either by arbitration, or should the employer not attend his case, we will then find that we will then start the process of getting the award from the DRC and certifying that award through the CCMA, so that it has the powers of a magistrate's court order, which we will then go up to and towards execution processes against the company. It's important that even after the award is granted, the employer can still negotiate with the council, and we will still take on the request from an employer to settle his dispute, and we will work again, like how we alluded to earlier, on a proposal whereby we can take that to the regional secretary for determination as well. I'd just like to make it very clear though with the employers that where there's a compliance notice and after 7 days the employer has not negotiated or contacted the inspectorate department, at that point, please note that you will also have to, if you are contacting inspectorate, you will also have to send proofs of payment and stuff to the legal department as well, because in all likelihood, at that point, it's already made its way from the inspectorate department to legal. Through current processes of execution, we do have an attorney's firm. You would find that probably existing employers who've had compliance issues at this point in time would have been contacted by an attorney's firm that we utilize as the counsel for execution processes. Once it's with the execution attorneys, it would be very difficult at that point for me to step in and negotiate with the employer, because those attorneys will then start negotiation processes with them on the outstanding amounts. So I would always suggest that once you see an award as an employer, start negotiating with legal immediately. You can always contact our offices and ask for me, and I'll be able to advise the employer where they are, where we are in our processes, and how to go about avoiding the extra costs that are involved in execution. If there's a dispute from the company, we will take on that dispute, whether it be prior to award or after the award, and we'll do our best to ensure that we can make the employer understand, or alternatively, if there's a point that is in fact where the employer is correct, we'll take it on board as well, and we'll make the changes that are necessary. All right. I just wanted to say as well that where we take an award with a company in an amount that was stipulated for, an example, 200,000 rand, but the employer is making payments towards that. I want the companies to understand that that amount is fluid and that we would work with that as well, and so we would reduce accordingly wherever it is. So where they find that we are executing on a process where we've got a 200,000 rand award and he notifies us that, look, we've actually made payments of about 50,000 towards that, we will reduce accordingly as well and work with the company.
Sure. All right. Thank you. I'm not sure if Daniel has anything to add with respect to that, because he deals with the calculations in depth as well. Yeah.
Walter, yeah, what I wanted to say, and I forgot to allude to this, is how do employees notify the council when they need to make changes on their returns? There's two methods of that. I'll just briefly go through it quickly. The company can apply for online access, which is access directly linked to MIBCO system. So if they go into MIBCO system, they'll have a password. It's free of charge. They will go in there and see all the employees, and they can apply whatever changes they need to. There's also a training manual on our website on that page. So it takes you through step by step on how to do changes. As I said, we encourage employees to register online. It's the quickest way to do your changes. If you're sending a manual return, it would have to be sent to us on email, that type of thing, or delivered to our offices. Then someone's still got to capture that. So there can be delays sometimes in that. So we encourage employees to register for online. If you have to send a manual notice to us to make changes, there's a document on the back of the statement, which they can fill in. Obviously, we don't have time to do training on that, but they can contact our officers. We will provide training on site, or one of our staff member can go out and with the inspectorate to visit the company to assist them if they're really battling. To come back to the account and the calculation and everything, we work very well, very closely with legal department. We do an Excel statement for employees showing what is interest outstanding, what is capital outstanding. Obviously, when they're negotiating on settlement, the priority is to settle capital as quick as possible. That is a priority for us because it affects members' claims. Yeah. And also, the employee needs to take cognizance. The longer they leave the debt, the more interest there's going to be. So the quicker they come to a compromise and settle with us in a shorter, quicker period as best as possible, that is going to be the best way forward for them. Okay.
Sure. All right. No, thank you. Thank you very much for that. We will take a few more seconds break, and thank you as well to our panelists as well for joining us. I will request Spelele Nyuso to also join us as the Regional Secretary for closing remarks as well before we actually conclude the session. And we actually thank you for joining us this far. So just give us a few more minutes of your time as we wrap up. We'll come back shortly. Right. Good afternoon and welcome to our session where we are decoding MIBCO Compliance. So if you just joined us, we are in the final segment of the session. And so before we actually close, I'll hand over to Nathan, who is in charge of the Inspectorate Department, for his closing remarks, and then I'll hand over to Mr. Nyuso as well. So over to you, Nathan.
Okay, thank you. There's a few things I need to clarify. I think one, regarding the fixed term contracts, earlier Pumi was asked a question about what happens when an employee goes on maternity. Does the relief employee have to be registered? The answer is yes. And the reason is that every employee, be it on a fixed term contract, is regarded as an employee, and all the provisions of all the MIBCO collective agreements apply. The only scenario where a new relief employee would not pay Provident Fund would be if he hasn't worked in the industry before. The agreement makes it clear that any fixed term contract employee or a probationary employee, the Provident Fund is not compulsory for the first 6 months of employment in the industry. So I just want to clarify, make that clear that it doesn't mean if you employ him, if an employer employs a relief employee, the first 6 months of employment at that company doesn't count. The first 6 months in the industry counts. That's what that means in terms of fixed-term contracts. Then the other issue is in terms of MIBCO scope of application, who pays and who doesn't pay Provident funds. I think if you look at the scope of application, the threshold is 211,000. I think employers, please note that. Anyone earning in excess of 211,596 rand and 30 per annum is not compelled to pay levies and/or provident funds. All right. Similarly, the bonus, I think I mentioned earlier, every employee is entitled to 2 weeks bonus. The threshold applies there as well. If you earn below that threshold, an employee is entitled to 2 weeks bonus, but there's also a capping on the bonus. I think the capping is 2 weeks bonus with a maximum of 5,405 rands and 29 cents. So that basically will cover that. And the next issue I need to just appeal to employers is that from the inspector's point of view is that when an agent contacts you guys to make an appointment to come and do an inspection, we find that a lot of employers are turning the agents away, saying that no, my bookkeeper's not available or my records are with the accountant. I just want to clarify that. An employer, in terms of the admin agreement, is compelled to have records available on their premises at all times. And I don't think the agent is not mandated to speak to any third party in the industry. Not accountants, not lawyers, not bookkeepers. We deal directly with the employees. And I think the onus is on the employer then to just make arrangements with his bookkeeper or accountant or consultant to make those records available on the date that the agent needs to visit.
Sure.
Thank you.
All right. No, thank you very much. Mr. Nyusa, anything you'd like to say in closing?
In closing, sir, just one or two from me. Neville might have touched on it a bit, but one of the biggest problems we have as well with inspections is, and I'm hoping and praying that the wonderful colleagues who are joining us online are not guilty of this. It's employers that hide unregistered employees because we announce ourselves, we make time available and appointments with the employers, and assuming that employers would actually have all the records available for us and to us when we get there. So we do it for that, but that also gives rise to people that hide employees that are not registered. I must say that every single employee working in the motor industry must be registered with MIBCO. Whether the person is earning above or below the threshold must be registered with the motor industry. So please, we plead with you to register your employees, because it becomes a MIBCO problem when this person who would have agreed to the arrangement of not being registered for over 10, 20 years, when they finally retire or resign, and all of a sudden they know there's a MIBCO now, and they want to come to us and want to claim monies, knowing very well that they were never registered and no deductions were ever made. So please, employers should not have arrangements, side arrangements with their employees not to deduct monies for levies and provident funds, because if and when we find out, according to legislation, we then claim, let's assume that the employer has not been deducting for 10 years, and there is proof that this person has been working for 10 years. We then, as MIBCO, hold the employer liable for the 8% contribution of the employer for the whole of 10 years. Right? So let's not get to that stage. Let's comply per the motto. Let's comply. And the last part from me as well, just to plead as well, when it comes to unauthorized deductions, we have that a lot, especially even in the filling stations environment, where employees are judged to have stolen from the employer, there are shortages and all of those things. We understand those things. Those things do happen. Yeah. They do happen. However, there is a correct process to follow. I think Pumi will tell you that before they can actually even entertain an employer coming to them and saying, we want to claim from this employee's Provident Fund, there is a process the employer must have followed. The employer must have followed a formal disciplinary process against that employee. That employee must have been found to be guilty of that offense, must have signed an acknowledgement of that to say, I'm acknowledging that indeed I did what I'm told, what is said I've done. And also, the employer, there is recourse criminally that the employer goes to the police station and opens a case. There is an affidavit as well that this person stole from me, because that's a crime. So we need all of those things to be followed for employers not to unilaterally deduct monies from employees without following due process. We do not overprotect employees who are guilty of such charges, but there's got to be a proper, fair procedure that is followed, that is governed by the Labour Relations Act, it's governed by the BCEA, it's governed by our main agreements that employers need to follow. But indeed, like my other colleagues have said, our offices are open. We do have meetings with employers on a weekly basis, be it they want to understand compliance issues, they want to understand returns issues, they want to understand how funds are calculated and paid, and all, anything. They want to understand how the legal process goes. All of those things, we are available. Just make an appointment. The team will be there available to assist you all the way. And my own office as well is available. I am contactable. You can email me as well. My email address is everywhere in the MIBCO website. When you're looking for the email address of MIBCO KZN, it's my own email address that's there. You can write me an email. You can make an appointment. We are available to assist you. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you very much to our esteemed guest from MIBCO. We have reached the end of our discussion today, and we'd like to thank you as well for tuning in and for those questions and those comments as well. They are really, really much appreciated. So I think we will end it here for today, but I think one of the key points that we will like to take note of at the end of the session is that it is quite important for employers to check beforehand, to not just operate as an autopilot, so to speak. So if you are unsure about anything with respect to how your things are set up with MIBCO, do contact. You may also contact us as Petra Connect. We would be happy to assist you in connecting you with the right people. We would be able to assist you with that advice as well. So thank you very much for joining us. And if there are any questions, even after the session, feel free to contact us and we will be very much happy to assist you in that regard.